There we go. Recording in progress, right? So firstly, welcome everybody to this, which is the fourth masterclass in our first series from the Business for Good program. I'm going to just set up today's session, and then I'll hand over to Jane, who will in turn introduce Will, who will be taking the vast majority of the session for you. So I'll leave those introductions to Jane. My job really is just to introduce Business for Good and Everyone's Edinburgh. So we are a charity. Everyone's Edinburgh is a charity which was formed earlier this year, and the mission is really to help Edinburgh become a more sustainable and fairer city, really trying to accelerate the movement towards meeting the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, working collaboratively between the council, universities, small businesses, larger businesses, charities, third sector, just coming up with solutions that can move the city forward in that direction. And the first major program that we've launched is the Business for Good program. And this is aimed at helping predominantly Edinburgh businesses, but great to see businesses from Nigeria and Paisley and beyond, which is fantastic. At helping businesses move closer to that goal. And we do that through a series of products and services available. Most of them are free, some of them are paid for, and I'll touch at some of them at the end. But one of the core ways we try to support businesses is through this series of masterclasses that have touched on things like developing a purpose for your business or creating a great place to work, living fair wage, things like that, that again help the city more thrive in a more sustainable and prosperous way. So as I said, these are the masterclasses that we've had so far: introducing Business for Good, find your purpose, great places to work, and today is towards net zero, which Jane and Will talk about. The last thing I wanted to do, and I'll mention this again, but I'll flag it up here, is we've got our first in-person networking event on Wednesday, the 29th of June, between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock at Edinburgh Napier University Business School. So I'll mention it now. I will send details as a follow-up to this to everyone who's registered to this event. But it would be great to see anybody who's in Edinburgh and wants to meet like-minded people and develop the idea of business for good for themselves and as a community to get together. So I'd urge you and welcome you to that event. So that's enough for me. I'm going to hand over to Jane now and Will, and thanks again for joining us.
Magic. I'll just unmute myself a bit. So hello, I'm Jane, and I'm one of the impact advisors with the Everyone's Edinburgh Business for Good programme. I've met some of you before, but not all of you, and hopefully I'll meet more on the 29th, which would be lovely. Now, my background is more in the environmental impact side of things, so I am geekily excited. I think we're very lucky to have Will Richardson here today of Green Element and Compare Your Footprint. Now, Will introduce himself, I'm sure, but just to give you a flavour, Green Element is a management consultancy, an environmental management consultancy that started up in 2004, way back when I was just having a wee think about maybe getting into environmental impact. So I think you've helped over 120 organisations. I saw on your website there, Will. Now it's been going like a powerhouse for a long time now. And not content with that, Will and his co-founder started up Compare Your Footprint, which I'll let Will talk about more, but that's a really exciting tool that's really accessible to small businesses. I point quite a few people in that direction myself. So without talking any further, I'll pass over to Will.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you. Yeah, no, brilliant to be here. And thank you so much for being on the call. It's really good to understand your businesses and what it is that you're doing. I think we were going to have breakout rooms, but with such a wide variety of businesses on this call, I think it's possibly better that we don't have a breakout room, because it'd be kind of weird if you're in a room on your own. But great to meet you all. I will just share my screen. As Jane alluded to, I've been doing this for quite a while now, helping organisations become sustainable. I did my first talk on sustainability when I was 14 years old. I was in a debate about, is climate change human made? And so I've been thinking about and doing this for quite a long time now. And it's nice to see that the UK has finally woken up. I say the UK because I don't think the world has. We've got colleagues around the world and in their respective countries. It's interesting to see the cynicism that still is going on. But I think that we, as people that understand this problem, can use that to our advantage, i.e., when I first started talking about sustainability, we were talking about it on this call earlier. I never used the word environment. So when you are helping an organization become sustainable, or whether you're helping your business to reduce their impact, you don't need to use the word environment in it. And the main reason is that you're mitigating risk, you are saving money, and you are looking at loads of other different reasons for reducing your environmental impact, and I'll go into that at a later stage. So a bit about us. We are set out. I'll be talking to you with my green element hat on. So I'll mention compare your footprint on this slideshow, on this presentation. But for the most part, I think green elements is probably more pertinent to talk about. We equip organizations to work towards a sustainable future. So we're looking at incorporating absolutely everything that is within the environmental arena and within your impact. And we are trying to mitigate that risk and reduce the impact. We've been a B Corp since, I say late 2015, because we got it in December, and we're on the website for January 2016. And for me, it was, it's nuances. I've been told off by our marketing team. I'm not allowed to say 2015. I have to say 2016. But one of the reasons why I'm mentioning it is partly because of what Simon and Jane do for a living, helping organizations become more purpose-driven. And I personally think it's absolutely integral to running your business. If we want to have businesses that are reducing their impact, then it's not just about the environment, it's about absolutely everything. And the environment is a large, small part of that, depending on your business. But if you aren't purpose-driven and you're not thinking about the whole picture, then you're going to struggle actually reducing your impact as a whole. So I implore you, whether you go down the B Corp route or whether you just think about your ethics and think about how you are running your business, I implore you to think about that, because I think it will help you massively with your reductions for your environments. Practice what you preach. Just do, if you're telling organizations to become sustainable, then do it yourself. I live in Edinburgh. I moved up here about 6 years ago. The Green Element team are based in London, and I train it every time. And yes, it is more expensive to catch the train than it is to fly, but it just means I go down less, and I make sure that I spend more time on Zoom. It's there's no excuse for it being less environmental. I think that you really do need to think about your actions and how they can affect others. I think that the flying issue is an interesting one, and I'm not actually against flying personally. I think that flying is an integral part to, it sounds really kind of like highfalutin, but world peace, because I think that we as individuals need to understand each other's cultures. And it's great that Adebayo is on the line from Nigeria, because Zoom, Zoom has also opened up that kind of understanding and being able to, just being able to understand each other. We've updated the 120 businesses to 190. I don't really understand these statistics, to be honest with you, because we always currently, at the moment, I think we're working with about 50 different businesses at this very moment in time. So I don't think we've actually really kind of worked it out. We've just gone for a number that's that makes us not BS people, because you don't want to say too many people. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce as many organizations' impacts as possible. And that's the reason why we set up Compare Footprint, which is a carbon footprint tool that works on actuals and works on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We specialize in carbon footprinting businesses and environmental management systems. That's what we do. We don't do anything else. We don't, we don't work in ESG. We literally just do the environment of ESG. And I've always been quite clear about that. And I think that's really important, because I think that what people need are specialists. And what's great is that even in our team, we've got about 30 odd people. And even in our team, we have specialists in the different environmental parts, because it's still quite broad environments, and it's still really useful. So what does environmental success look like for your business? And we're talking about this under the guise of net zero. Because there aren't huge amounts of people on this call, I'd love to ask you, what is your definition of net zero? And don't all speak at once. Go on, Jane, you went off mute. I'm actually going to pick on you.
Yeah, no, go for it. So for me, I would define net zero as finding a way to equalize the emissions you have going out of your business. So not looking at trying to pull down stuff that's already up there in the simplest form, but working out what's going out, getting that down as small as you possibly can. And when you've got those residual emissions, finding some way, and I hate using the word offset, to offset what's left. That is in sort of layman's terms what I would call net zero. Maybe.
David, I'm going to pick on you because you work for Christian's firm.
I mean, I think it is about, ultimately for a company, getting towards net zero is knowing what your carbon footprint is, and then how you reduce that. And ultimately what we want to do is get to net zero, and that's gonna, I think that's, Jane sort of summed it up really well. Sorry.
Okay. No, brilliant, thank you. Nicola, David, Adebayo.
Yeah, I think Jane nailed it.
Okay.
And I think Jane makes a significant point about the offsetting. Everything that we do consumes. We can't get around that. And how we can reduce our consumption, but we still consume. So unless we're going to be generating some kind of energy in some form to compensate for what we're actually using, then we need to offset it in some way.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just making the effort and working towards zero. We're not saying that you're going to get to zero, but as long as you're putting in the effort and trying to engage your staff.
Adebayo. Oh, is he on the call anymore?
He's
Yes.
still there, but I know he's in a shared office. I'm not sure if he can.
Gotcha.
Always come
Okay.
off. But Adaby,
So-
I'll put things in the chat if you want to. I can call them out.
So it's interesting, isn't it? That definition of net zero. If you speak to different businesses and different organizations, then people will come up with different definitions. We're seeing a lot with the Advertising Standards Authority at the moment with trying to understand what net zero means. If you're to look at the science, net zero does not include offsetting. Period. Its science-based targets do not include offsetting as a part of their strategy. So therefore, and I have heard the arguments for offsetting for, as you can imagine, quite a few years now. And one of the biggest arguments is, oh, well, it's a part of our reduction strategy. Oh, well, we're going to do it because we're going to offset the stuff that we can't reduce. But what I have seen time and time and time again is organizations offsetting, period. They don't reduce because they go down the easy route. It's so much easier. And the problem with offsetting is the fact that it's £2 a ton. There are organizations out there that are purporting that you can offset for free. They'll sign up for a 3-month period with us and you can offset for free for 3 months. How does that work? A true carbon removal is in the region of about $100 to $150 a ton. And no one's going to be giving that away for free because it's too expensive. And so I implore you to think about what your definition of net zero is when you are looking at your environmental business plan, because you need to think about the ramifications of what that means around the world. And I've done a number of webinars on offsetting, and I won't carry on, but I'm very happy to give you some information on why the offsetting argument just doesn't stack up from a science point of view and also from a social economic point of view as well. There are people, the reason why the Indigenous Environmental Network is so anti-offsetting is because it totally is about the first world countries being able to carry on polluting and justifying it by spending £1 a ton to do that. It's just not there. So we're creating an environmental management system. What exactly is an environmental management system? It really is quite simple. You basically want to understand your environmental impact. You want to know how to reduce those impacts. You want to set targets against those impacts. And you want to bring the whole organization that you work in on board with it. And it has to be top down as well. You have to have the senior team, the senior leadership team to be a part of the strategy and to be a part of the process, partly driven by the fact that that's a part of behavior. And if you don't have your senior leadership team practicing what they preach, then it's very hard to say, well, this is what we should be doing as an organization. But equally, there may well be financial ramifications around setting your environmental targets and the sort of stuff that you do, depending on the size of the business. We, as a business, have a formal environmental management system. We've got ISO 14001, but the cost to the business is having members of the team running it and managing it, and then having everyone adding in their travel and stuff. So I would imagine that maybe half an hour a week or whatever. So there's still a cost there, but it's not a huge cost to us because we're in serviced offices. We do think about the offices that we're in. So we look at the environmental impact of those offices and we vet. So in London, which is our biggest impact, we're in X and Y. which is actually a fellow B Corp. And it does cost us slightly more to be in there. So therefore there is a financial cost there, but equally we know that it's almost been taken care of for us because we know that they are doing the right thing with regards to their business. So what sort of things will you see from setting up an environmental management system? You'll see definitely a level of efficiency. And you will see that the business will be saving money depending on the size of the business, going back to what I was talking about before. So if you, as a rule of thumb, what I tend to say to people is if you are a company of 50 plus people, you'll see a financial savings that will probably outweigh the cost of implementing a formal environmental management system. Less than that, then you're probably going into the moral and ethics of why you're doing it, which I personally think outweigh the financial remuneration. But as a consultant, I can't say that really. I have, you know, I'm very honest about the fact that we will save money if you're 50 plus people. Obviously, if you're a manufacturing organization, then you will, those numbers will dramatically reduce because your impact will be much higher with regards to impact per person or per FTE. And that means that it may well be worth actually reducing that energy usage or reducing the travel or looking at your business model and trying to understand how it is that you are able to reduce your impact. What you'll find, and I think you're seeing it much more so now, and I think David at Pawprint and the team there, I mean, their whole business model is around helping organizations reduce the impact on a personal level. And I genuinely don't think 15 years ago Pawprint would have existed, because it would have been really hard to sell. The fact that they exist and they're doing so well is testament to the fact that employees want to work for an organization that is environmental. Employees want to be a part of that journey, and which is why Boost staff morale is such a big part of this now. I think that if you don't see the financial savings, that they're vastly outweighed by Boost staff morale. People want to work for an organization that's sustainable, and then obtain new contracts. We're seeing so much more in the rate in people asking what your environmental impacts with regards to tenders. So many organizations are now saying we will only work for an environmental organization. I remember again going back to when I first started, most tenders didn't include sustainability, and if they did, it would be 2%, literally 2%, 1%, 5% of the impacts on that tender. I've seen it as high as 20, 30% now. And I have also seen it where if you don't have a formal environmental management system, then you can't apply to work for that particular organization as a company, which is fascinating to see that change, the step change in what's going on with regards to sustainability. Next year in 2023, every single new B Corp will have to have an environmental management system, and it has to be a formal one. that's a big deal, because they are driving categoric change through society. And the fact that they recognize that you need to have a formal EMS to become a B Corp is really interesting. And I think that it'll help businesses around the world, because it will put the environment on the radar of many businesses that wouldn't necessarily have thought about it. So what's the structure of environmental management? We're looking at the context. So what is it that you do as a business? We've got a couple of service-based industries here. Adebeo, I can't remember what you said. I thought it was oil and gas. But you need to have strong leadership, and it needs to be conducted from the top in order to understand your environmental impact. And you need to have support across all parts of the organization. And that means that you need to be planning what is it that you're doing and how you're doing it. What's your operations? How is it that you are reducing? Is it a part of your business? Do you need to think about the way that your business runs? I think this is a really tricky conversation that I've started having with organizations. I've started going into companies and looking at the way the company runs and saying, you're not fit for the future. You need to think about the way that you do your business, because those conversations need to be had. We need to be thinking about our future generations. We need to be thinking about who we are as organizations and how we're going to reduce that impact, and then constantly improve on that impact. So in a nutshell, what are the first steps that you would take? Well, what sort of structure do you need? If you're a very small organization, maybe you just need the founder to be heading it up. Or maybe you need someone to run it internally. And historically, we used to see that in a smaller organization being the office manager. But I would say now it's starting to really change. And it's exciting, because if you asked me who in an organization was running the environmental management, I couldn't tell you. In the past, it was office manager, facilities. Now it's marketing, it's people department, it's sales, it's, all parts of the organization. It just takes a passionate individual in an organization to take the mantle and to drive that systemic change that is needed within that particular organization. So what people do you need in place? It's always really helpful to have people from a cross section of the business, and the larger the business, the more important that is, because as we all know, small businesses, we all tend to have lots of different hats on, but the larger businesses is quite siloed. So therefore, what impact does the IT department have? For example, do they have a server room? Do they need a server room? When you're pitching for new business, do you need to travel? Is it imperative? Will you actually lose the work if you don't travel? We win over 60% of any new inquiry that comes in at Green Elements, and we don't travel to any businesses to pitch for the work at all. And that came from me moving up to Edinburgh 6 years ago and I was the salesperson, and I made a conscious decision that we weren't going to go to potential client sites, and it's made absolutely no difference at all. It's, if anything, has made us more successful, weirdly, because we're better at selling. So, which actually makes it nicer, because I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I can spend much more time with them than being on the road, because selling, the sales department was the last thing that I took let go in the business. We've now got 2 salespeople in Green Element and 1 in Compay Footprint. But it's interesting that you can literally just chuck the rule book out the window and do what you think is the right thing to do in order to reduce your environmental impact. So less of me talking. I am going to stop sharing, and I'd like to understand what the environmental impacts are of your particular organisations. Don't all shout at once. That'd be really embarrassing.
I'm going to chip in here, Will. I just because I'll be interested just to get your view on it. So so one of the and I really appreciate what you said about being an expert on, in this field, and that's why it's brilliant you to have on this call, because like my background is in brand and marketing, but it's always been with trying to help purposeful businesses grow and sell by conveying that message in a way. So my specialty is in brand and marketing. But now I'm working with the sort of Everyone's Edinburgh, and trying to support businesses on that general move to being a more sustainable and a sort of fairer city. And within that context, helping the businesses within Edinburgh move in that direction. One of the city's aims is to be net zero by 2030. So I'm just with my hat on. I suppose the organisation I'm thinking about specifically here is the City of Edinburgh, and its goal to work towards net zero. So that's obviously, it's a massive task, and 2030 is not that far away. And what you were saying about offsetting not being in maybe an appropriate way forward. What how do we help businesses, households, the city understand what the best course of action is to go in that direction, and what does that mean? So I know it's maybe a massive question, but
no, it's not. Fun enough, it's actually very simple. Reduce.
Right.
I can
Reduce.
literally reduce your impact. Science-based targets initiative have been massively helpful in this story, because what they have done is they legitimized science, and they made science much more accessible with regards to this journey. And the science, but if you want to sign up to your science-based targets, you cannot offset. And the reason why you can't is because you need to reduce. It's not rocket science. You just need to reduce.
And so what does net zero mean then? What's the net mean?
Real net zero is 20. We would expect every organization, particularly in the UK, to be real net zero by 2050. What that means is that the first 90 to 95% of their emissions have to be been reduced. And then the last 5%, potentially 10%, in carbon removals. And the reason why they introduced carbon removals is because they recognize that it's so expensive. So most organizations can't spend £100,000 a year to remove their carbon.
Right. Okay, good.
And that's a small business.
Right. Fantastic. Reduce, end of.
I'm afraid so. And it's the interesting thing is it's the conversation that no one wants to have, because it's really hard to have.
No, but I think, sorry, David, but I think that clarity is brilliant. You know, just that's I think I've heard so many people, you know, you obviously we might want to get into scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and all those sorts of things, but actually just saying reduce your carbon footprint, your impact, end of. That's it. You know, off we go. So, sorry, David, over to you.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. I recognise there's a little background noise here.
Yes, we can hear you.
A couple of points. I don't disagree with what you're saying, Will. And I think the major contribution is reduction. But like I said before, everything that we do, life consumes. We consume energy, and that consumption needs to be paid for some way. And and if you boil it down and down and down, it comes to energy production. And until we can get a production of energy which is abundant and creates more, and it's enough energy to not create any harm, then we're not going to eliminate that last 5-10%. We have to accept that, unless we get, and what I'm getting at is unless we crack nuclear fusion. And the other point I've got is coming from an engineering background, where contracts were won and lost on your health and safety records. That's why a lot of engineering firms focus so hard on their health and safety, because they can win and lose a contract with that. I suspect that the way that we encourage organisations to become more environmentally aware and efficient is that contracts are won and lost on whether or not they have an EMS system and are actually following it through. I'm not sure that I think it needs to be market driven as opposed to organisationally driven or even individually driven. What's your thoughts?
I got most of that. Jane, did you? So
I think there were 2 points, weren't there? And David, just give me the thumbs up because some of it got lost, wasn't there? So there was the part about how do we, given the business that you have, everything consumes, and that consumption you were saying boils down to energy production.
energy.
Yes. How do we deal with that? And then your second point was around you were talking about tenders, Will, earlier, and how they can be won and lost now to a much greater extent based on, do you have an EMS system? Are you thinking about your environmental impact? As opposed to previously, perhaps the emphasis was on health and safety. Is that right, David? And I think you were pointing out, what was your question there around how do we make everyone aware of that? Is that what your point was there?
I'll try again.
Oh, that's better.
A bit more slowly as well. The 2 points where we've got an insatiable desire for energy, and that's the problem as I see it. We're not producing enough energy. We need more. And coming from an engineer background, contracts were won and lost on health and safety records. Now, it wasn't necessarily that the companies were particularly interested in health and safety, but they were interested in winning contracts. And I suspect that's the kind of movement we need to win and lose contracts based on the back of our environmental attitude. So not driven by organisations, but internally, but driven by the market. Did you hear me okay there?
Yeah.
Much better.
Yeah, no, much better. Yeah, I'd agree. I think that, but sadly, it's going to have to be a much quicker learning curve for organisations. We can't have the slow uptake that's potentially happens, and I know I've mentioned.
I suppose what I'm driving at is, how do we influence the market?
Yeah, I think companies like Corporate are massively part of this conversation, because what Corporate does, I don't want to speak on your behalf, David, sorry, but what Corporate does is it influences change within an organisation, and that change happens much quicker if it comes from the people rather than the organisation. So with regards to companies like Green Element, we're looking at the organisation, but we need a paw print in every organisation in order for us to do a really truly good job.
And yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
And then going back to the engineering world, if you're tendering for a contract, the person that makes the effort to discomfort themselves to fly across the planet to go and meet with someone, they're more likely to get that job than somebody who phones it in.
Yeah, I'd agree,
and
I think
prepared to go to effort.
Yeah, I'd agree, but I think that is the change that we need to have happen. I'm on the board for the Advertising Association, and one of the things that we are looking at is stopping all pitch meetings being done in person. And Sky are on board with this, and there's quite a lot of large advertising companies that are absolutely on board with this.
Do you think there's room for regulation so that government bodies force people to stop flying across the world, to equalise or so that other companies that are prepared to fly don't have a competitive edge?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not for nanny states. I'm probably more of a libertarian.
Yeah, I just wouldn't mind jumping in actually. Just adding from a personal point of view, is as I mentioned, I do brand and marketing work, and prior to lockdown, I didn't think you could do creative workshops remotely. I thought you had to do them in person in the room with 7 or 8 or whatever people. And so I used to spend all my life traveling around Scotland, UK, Hong Kong. I used to do them all over the world. Lockdown forced us to find a way to do it differently, and actually, as a result, now I would say that the workshop, the 3 to 4 hour workshop environment that we've created with people in America, in Brazil, done them in Southeast Asia, is actually much more productive, and it's a huge cost saving, because the likes of Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, they used to fly people from all over the world to be in one room together to do these workshops, and now we've created a way to do them without that. So I think there are ways. It's just people just have to wake up to finding what those ways are. And if for me personally, I was guilty of, well, there's no way you could do that, but you can.
Yeah. The other thing that people need to think about, and this is possibly more pertinent to larger organizations, is that instead of offsetting, invest in airlines. That if you are a big travel company, then why not invest in the people that are going to change the future in your particular industry? So don't put money into, I don't know, growing a tree some random place that's probably going to be cut down in 2 years' time anyway. Why not actually put that same money into the airline and into their research and development and buy shares in British Airways?
I think we should all be investing in nuclear fusion.
I've got friends who work in that, and it's I think that's a whole new topic, isn't it? Is it actually going to happen? I know it's been talked about for 40, 50 years. But actually, we've completely digressed onto, sorry, Jane, what we haven't done is looked at the environmental impacts of people's businesses.
I know, but I had a question that's going to bring you back there, Will, and it might resonate with Simon and certainly Nicola with professional services. So I was taking Simon's point. I thought, yeah, our workshops have now gone online. How worried do we need to be, and how big? We haven't sat down and worked this out. Is there a digital impact? Because our biggest impacts are travel, and actually we now have electric bikes, which has made a big difference in Edinburgh. But otherwise, we're online. So it's energy, but we've got some solar panels. So that's great. So now we're looking at, are we tying ourselves in knots?
something.
This meeting is being recorded.
So those are our biggest impacts. We're 3 people, we work out of our garden shed and we use electric bikes. So it's you know, do we need to tie ourselves in knots looking at our digital footprint? What can we do in that space?
Funny enough, one of the things that we do is look at people's digital or organizations' digital footprint. And I think what surprised me was there's quite a few organizations that it's higher than the travel. And I having come from a place where travel was always the biggest thing, and I would look at, I would talk about non-billable and billable hours and non-billable and billable travel. And so particularly, I mean, our largest industry is the advertising and marketing world. Hence why I'm now on the AA, work closely with the AA. And so therefore that particular industry, its largest impact has always historically been travel. But actually, now we're starting to understand the impact of digital. It's not necessarily the case. And I found that really interesting.
Will, were you involved in the calculating what digital channels and their carbon footprints? Because I was really interested to see that TV has a lower carbon footprint than digital advertising. Were you involved in that work at all? No.
We fed into it. We did our initial study with the AA 2 years ago on what does advertising, what's the footprint of all the advertising associations or companies. And what they did was, and I wasn't overly keen on it, they prorated it up. This time round, we actually asked every single company what their footprint actually was. And it's a much more accurate figure. But what the purpose disruptors brought to light was, forget about the companies, it's the impact of the adverts that has the biggest impact. So if you're looking at a Land Rover advert, then the amount of Land Rovers that are sold on a successful campaign have more of an impact than the campaign and the organization itself. And what they're trying to currently look at is that Scope 3 emissions and trying to understand the ramifications of that. It's fascinating what they're doing, because it is the only industry in the world to look at their whole industry holistically. And I think that the world will learn an awful lot with what the AA are currently trying to achieve.
Yeah, I'd agree.
How about you, Nicola? Is this your world? Have I understood what you do correctly?
Well, we work for large organisations and we help them with their internal comms and culture change. So we are seeing a lot more projects that are making mention of net zero, but we've also started tendering for works. So I'm seeing a lot of it coming up now on tenders. We're being asked about ours, and to be honest, that is something that we've just really started looking at. But since the pandemic, we're the same. All of our pitches have all went online, and even though we're back in the office now, we're still pitching online via Teams, and that's obviously reduced our impact. So yeah, like we definitely have reduced since the pandemic, I would say, which is positive. And that's what we're putting in. But I suppose we're looking for more advice on how to, because we're a team of 7. So yeah, we don't think our impact is that much. But when you're talking about your digital footprint, that's something I've not really looked into. So it's interesting.
With Compare Your Footprint, if your turnover is less than £300,000, then it's free.
Okay.
So you can, I know PawPrint use us to understand their footprint. But yeah, so, the most expensive, if you're over £30 million turnover, it's only £2,000.
Mhm.
So it's the reason we set Compare Your Footprint up was because of exactly what you've just said, Nicola. It's to take away the financial burden that can happen with regards to understanding your footprint. And once you understand that digital footprint, in your case, then you'll know exactly what it is that you should be doing to reduce it. And it may be as simple as making sure that your digital footprint is on renewables.
Mhm.
That's, it could be, it can be as simple as that.
Yeah, my previous role, I've been here for about a year, but my previous role was in the construction industry. So I've had ISO, I used to go through audits every year, but our motivation for that was winning work. Like we couldn't tender for works, we couldn't go on lists. It was, you had to have ISO 14001. So I seen David's point that that's the motivator. It wasn't that we were doing it to be good people. We were doing it to win contracts.
Apologies, I'm going to come off the meeting just now. I need to start giving some navigation here. So, thank you.
Lovely to see you, David.
Thanks, David. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
But
I'm
in
not
this
sure if we-
industry that we're in just now, that I'm in just now, it is very different. It's a creative industry, but it is interesting that they are starting to ask about it in the bids about your net zero. So I think there is
and
positive change happening. It's just slow.
And what's interesting is that communications on what net zero means, and it's fascinating to see the Advertising Standards Authority and other watchdogs now going after people like Brewdog, talking about being carbon neutral and going, no, you can't say that. And they are being reprimanded for their communications. And it comes down to understanding of definitions, which is really complicated, because if you're not in the know, then why on earth would you know what net zero actually means? I remember B Corp came to us about 2 or 3 years ago and said, oh, we're going to get everyone to become net zero by 2030. It's really exciting. And Emma and I looked at them and went, well, we're not going to be a part of that. And they were absolutely appalled. They were horrified that the only environmental management consultancy was not going to be a part of their net zero strategy. And I explained why we weren't going to be a part of it. And then about a year ago, they came, I had a conversation with them and they went, now we understand why you didn't want to be a part of our net zero strategy. We really kind of ballsed up there, didn't we? And I was like, you could say that. Communications could have been better.
I'm just conscious of time, Will, but you've mentioned Compare Your Footprint. Do things like that definition of net zero, and is that all part of that platform?
Yes and no. It's Compare Your Footprint. It's understanding your footprint. So it's understanding your carbon footprint. We'll be rolling out a update about, so you can set your science-based targets using the tool as well, which I think will be really useful for SMEs.
And when's that likely to happen, do you think?
As soon as we can get it out there. Oh man, running a software company is not easy. It doesn't go as you think it will. I've seen David laughing there because I think we're probably both in the same.
Yeah, I mean,
yes, that's it.
As soon as possible. I think it's really important, but we're actually going to be updating our dashboard. One of the things that we've got that's over and above our competitors, we've got over 10,000 carbon factors. So we've got the most extensive carbon factors of any other platform, which means that we're very techy and we're very environmental, kind of in inverted commas, i.e. we can do everything, but it doesn't look amazing. And
Right.
a lot of our competitors look amazing, but they don't do the job properly. So we have to up our ante to make it much more, the user experience much better.
Okay, that's good. Good. Right. I'm just conscious of time. Is there any last points, Will or Jane?
Sign up to compare your footprint, I think.
Yes.
I'm very conscious that we didn't talk about people's environmental impacts, which was the whole idea of this.
Yeah, went in some great directions, but I think
So
we got
apologies for that.
That's okay.
It's digital impact, but you know, it's getting people started, isn't it?
Okay, well, listen, I'll just come to a bit of a close. I'll just share my screen just to finish with. So firstly, thank you, Will, for coming along and sharing your expertise and wisdom, even if we didn't talk about environmental impacts of our specific businesses. It's as you mentioned, you know, it's an area of your expertise, and that just shines through. And you know, for me personally, it's like, well, these are the things that I need to get up speed, even on for my own small business, you know, as a almost like as a freelance consultant. So it's definitely given me food for thought. And thanks, Jane, for bringing Will on board and introducing the session, and thanks for everybody else for showing up. So we did have like 20 people signed, and 19 people registered. So I'm not sure what happened to the rest of them, but anyway, it was good to see. Pardon? It's a sunny day, yeah. Sports day, if it's probably anything to do with my family. But anyway, it was great to see you. And just on this final screen, it was just to let you know there are other things that we have available as part of the Business for Good program. So we have one-to-one consultancies with myself and Jane and Pam, who's the other impact advisor. You can join the network where we try and get regular updates. I mentioned the event on the 29th of June. So that's our first in-person gathering where we're getting people together as part of the network. We have an online course that is free to businesses in Edinburgh, and this is a sustainability course for businesses run out of the Napier University, Edinburgh Napier University. And we also have the Impact Journey training, which myself and Jane and Pam deliver, which is it comes from Scotland Can Be. So it's actually aligned to the whole B Corp sort of methodology and working towards that. It's not B Corp certification, but using the whole stakeholder analysis and impact aware and looking to improve your positive impact and reduce your negative impact. So so that's available. And you could always have appointments with myself or Jane or Pam as well. So there's a few sort of follow-ups for you. Thanks again for joining, and I will stop sharing and stop recording. And if I can, there we go. Stop